Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're very happy to be here with all of you. We'll give everyone a few seconds to join from the waiting room. My name is Sabrina Paganoni, and I'm here speaking from the HEALEY Center for ALS at Mass General. And as every week, I'm really happy to be here with Dr. Cudkowicz, as well as our patient navigation team, Alison Bulat and Catherine Small. And for tonight, we are really excited to have Dr. Sharon Hesterlee as our guest speaker from the Muscular Dystrophy Association. So without further ado, I'll ask the host to advance the next slide so that we can have Sharon introduce herself and the great work that they do at the MDA. We are so happy about this partnership with MDA. As you know from previous meetings, previous webinars, the MDA supports the platform trial. It's really fantastic that different groups and foundations are coming together to support this initiative for the benefit of ALS and the entire community. So with that, Sharon, I'll turn it over to you.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to present here. So as Dr. Paganoni mentioned, I'm Sharon Hesterlee. I'm the Chief Research Officer at the Muscular Dystrophy Association. And I've been in this neuromuscular space for over 20 years now. My background is in neuroscience, and I started my career with the MDA, helping develop some translational research and venture philanthropy programs. And I've left and I've worked for some other organizations, and I went to industry, and I spent some time at Pfizer, and I worked for some biotech companies. And then I returned to MDA in 2019 to take some of those things that I've learned in industry to apply back to our programs, and immediately walked straight into a pandemic. So it's been a wild ride for the last couple of years, but I'm really pleased to be back, and I'm really pleased to be back in the ALS space as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about MDA and its programs. And if we go to the next slide, can I advance them, or do you need to? That's fine. So for anyone who's not familiar with MDA, so, we've been around for a long time. We're an umbrella organization. So we actually cover over 300 neuromuscular diseases, including ALS. And I think a lot of people may ask why an organization with the words muscular dystrophy in its name covers ALS. And the answer to that question is really, when we were founded back in the 50s, people didn't know what caused muscle weakness all the time. I think doctors would see patients who would come in complaining of muscle weakness, and it wasn't really clear if it was weakness caused by weak muscles or if it was weakness because the nervous system controlling those muscles was having a problem. And so a lot of these things got lumped together as just muscle weakness. And as we learned more and more about the different causes of these different disorders, and eventually where known, or where there was a gene behind it, we identified genes, we sort of broke everything down into a lot of different categories. But that was the primary reason. ALS caused muscle weakness, so it was included in our program. And the other reason is because Eleanor Gehrig asked Jerry Lewis to include it. And so you don't say no in that situation. And so we have covered ALS ever since that request. So if I can go to the next slide. So just a little bit about what we've done in ALS. So in the research side, since its inception, we've expended about $170 million funding various research projects through our grants program. And that includes over time, everything from the identification of the SOD1 mutation, which some people might know was the first genetic mutation that was shown to lead to ALS. And developing a mouse model for that. We did funding into work that ultimately became Realiatech, which was the first drug approved for ALS. And some other things, for example, we funded a study of sodium phenylbutyrate, which some of you may know is one of the components of the Amylyx drug. I think at Mass General, actually, we funded that work. And we also invested almost $30 million with the ALS Therapy Development Institute in their drug program. And some of that work has resulted in a drug called AT1501 at a company that's changed hands multiple times, but it's in phase 2 testing now. And so as you can see, we've just been involved in a lot of the different work that has, along with many other funders, has helped support ALS research, and very importantly, including the HEALEY platform study, which we think is, just a huge and major contribution to the field. So if we can move to the next slide. So this is a big slide. It's got a lot going on, but in some ways, maybe that illustrates the point that at the organization at MDA, we do have a lot going on. So we have a care center network. We have 150 neuromuscular specialty sites across the US that see over, 60,000 people with 90,000 visits annually. We also have a registry that we collects clinical data at a subset of those sites, at about 60 of those sites. And I'll mention that a little bit more later because we also collect ALS data at those sites. And a research grants program total, we've actually invested about $1 billion into neuromuscular disease research. And you can see 140, that should actually say 170, my fault, went into ALS research. And you can kind of see ALS is sort of the third largest category after other Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So it's a significant commitment. We work very closely with industry and pharma, and we have a lot of collaborations around data collection and medical education and insights. And we've also funded over 7,000 unique investigators and trained about 2,000 new scientists, which we're really proud of. We have an annual professional conference. This is scientists talking to other scientists mostly, and also clinicians talking to scientists and clinicians. In 2021, we were down a little bit because it was all virtual, but we had about 900 registered attendees. So to give you an idea what the scope of that is like. So we do have a lot of scientific presentations and outward facing things that are directed to the community. However, this year, for the first time, if you are diagnosed with a neuromuscular disease in MDA's program, or a friend or family member or a caregiver, you can register to attend the professional conference for free if you like. And you can see that there's a little URL down at the bottom that you probably won't have time to jot down as I zip through this slide. But if you don't have time to screen capture or jot that down, IMALS also has this link. So the caveat would be that this is actually a scientific conference. So these talks are going to be very technical. And if you're good with that and that's what you want, you are welcome to attend virtually for free. And finally, we do a lot of professional medical education. And the goal there is really to reach beyond our care centers and out into the community, because that's where people are first diagnosed. Is when you see your, local, whoever your local healthcare provider is, or, your local neurologist who has to make that referral to get the final diagnosis. So we want to make sure that we raise the visibility of all of these neuromuscular diseases to increase diagnosis. So we go to the next slide. Just sort of focusing in on ALS, one care research and data collection are part of our big focus. So I mentioned that we had 150 care centers across the US, and a subset of those, about 48, are focused specifically on ALS for our sites. So that's where you could go to receive care there. And in research, I mentioned that we have funded about 170 million in grants to date. So an example of that, of course, one of the examples I pulled out is our funding for the HEALEY Platform Trial. And I will say that we're very excited about that work because it is such a really interesting way, an experiment of its own, to see how it works, to be able to test all of these drugs simultaneously. And are there really great economies of scale by doing that, and efficiencies? And I think it's really going to pay off, and it's a big undertaking. So there are a lot of players, and we're just happy to be one of them. As I'm sure you all well know if you attend this series. The final thing too is going to mention a little bit more about our MOVER clinical database. So this is the database I referenced earlier, and we have data for about 4,000 individuals, and 2,000 of those people are people with ALS. And these are people who are being seen at one of these 40, well, it's, a subset. It's actually, I think there are 28 care centers collecting data on ALS who have agreed to participate in this registry. And what happens then is, as you come in for your regular clinic visit, your regular care, all of that information gets transcribed into the medical record. And, it could just sit there, but if you have agreed to participate in the registry, we actually copy all of that data that goes into your medical record, goes into the registry as well. It's anonymous data, so you wouldn't be identified again, but we are able to use that data in aggregate to look at things like what is the average time from symptom onset to diagnosis, and to get a lot of other detail about that. We can track what drugs and treatments people are taking. And so this kind of data, I think, complements a lot of the other ALS registries out there that are patient-entered data, where you yourself go in on a handheld device or some other way to enter what's happening to you. So an example like that might be the database that's being run by, oh and goodness, I'm having just a complete, we just talked to them, Everything ALS, thank you. So that's an example of a patient in our database, which is really nice. And it kind of complements the data that's also being collected at the clinic visit. So ultimately our goal would be to link our registry with other data sets. So in any way, so whether it's Everything ALS or others, if we use the same global unique identifier for our patient data that another group is using, we should be able to cross-reference all that data. And then it becomes a really powerful data set. So that's sort of the goal with what's happening with our ALS data. And that's how it's a little bit different from some of the other registries, because it is coming straight out of that medical record. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So just to round out the discussion of what we do, we also are pretty vigorous advocacy program. So we worked very hard alongside the ALS Association and IMALS and other organizations to get the recently approved Act for ALS that was signed into law. And so we're really proud of that accomplishment. And my colleague, Paul Melmeyer, who leads our advocacy group, really headed up that work for us. I put the URL again for the advocacy work. If you go to that page, you can see all of the different current issues that we're involved in. And a lot of them are relevant to ALS, whether it's empowerment and independence. We participate on the federal committee for air travel. So looking at ways to make it, so really just how can we at least get airlines to stop destroying powered chairs? But a lot of other, things that go along with traveling when you have a disability that we're involved in. So there's a lot of ways you can get involved through advocacy. And then we also do a lot of community education too. So for example, we did a Facebook Live event with Dr. Paganoni with an ALS care and research update that you can access on our website. And we do events all year round. We tend to do more in May, an ALS awareness date that are designed for the community. And I checked and we don't have dates up for this year, but I'm sure we will do something in May. And I think that work has been planned, but the date will be available pretty soon. So that's just sort of an overview of what MDA does and what our commitment is around ALS. As you can see, it's certainly a very important part of our program, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there's time to do that. So.
Sure, I have a couple questions for you, so I might ask them now, and then we'll go to Sabrina's update of the platform. So first, just a comment. Kudos to MDA for inviting people with ALS to attend the annual professional conference in 2022. Thank you for doing that. There's a question about whether you have a care center in Hawaii.
An ALS care center or an MDA care? We do have an MDA care center. I don't off the top of my head know if it's ALS specific, but our adult neuromuscular centers certainly see people with ALS, whether or not they're an ALS designated center.
There's a question, is in your database, is genetic testing done on all the participants?
It is not. So we do track, it is actually not a very high percentage of people who have had genetic testing, which was interesting to us when we looked at that recently. And my guess is unless there's a family history, a lot of times it isn't ordered. But where there is genetic testing, we do capture that, and we capture the results of that when something is found. So
hopefully that'll go up. There's a comment about the month of May ALS awareness, that in 2021 CNN and Fox News didn't have one story about ALS awareness, and they're just wondering if there's things MDA can do to write up ALS facts in a media.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I think our communications team would see that as a challenge. To try to get more. So I think, we really are working pretty collaboratively with the other organizations in the space to make as much noise as possible around May in particular, but to keep that noise level up pretty high during the rest of the year as well. So we will certainly, like I said, our communications team, I will make sure that comment gets to them and they'll take it as a challenge.
Excellent, thank you. So Sabrina, maybe we'll switch to you.
Yeah, absolutely. We just have a couple of slides to update the audience as we do every week with what's going on in the platform trial. And then we'll take questions about the platform trial or any questions you might have. So if we can go to the next slide. As you know, we started 2022 with the news that we completed enrollment in the first 4 regimens that are testing zilucoplan, verdiperstat, CNM-Au8, and pridopidine. This means that we will know the results of these drugs later this year, and we are about to launch the 5th regimen, Trialos. So we expect the first participants enrolled over the next few days. So all of this to say that the trial is indeed a perpetual adaptive trial, continuing to add new drugs so that we can really test more drugs more efficiently for ALS. Next slide. And if you can go to the next slide, these are the final numbers of the participants who have been enrolled in the first 4 regimens. We shared a press release last week, so you can always go back to read the full story, but essentially we randomized about 160 individuals within each regimen, and they are participating in the placebo-controlled portion of the trial. And as you know, by design, we want to give everyone who desires access to the drug, access to the active drug at the end of their participation in the 6-month placebo-controlled trial. So right now we have hundreds of participants who have already completed their participation in their original regimen in the placebo-controlled portion, and now they are continuing on active drug as part of the open label extension. And so we will continue to keep these OLE or open label extension open until we know the results of these drugs, so that people can again make the decision to stay on the drug or not until we know those results, and then we'll discuss what to do next based on the results. And so once again, thank you so much for this amazing opportunity to test drugs more efficiently and faster for ALS. Obviously, none of this will be possible without the partnership with the ALS community, and especially the people who are participating in the study, their caregivers, families, and everyone who's supporting this trial just by raising awareness and sharing the news, helping others enroll. So all of this counts, and again, we're doing all of this together. So thank you for that. And so if we can go to the next slide. As always, we do want to continue to keep you posted on the news about the ALS trial, the platform trial, and other research. So we will continue to meet weekly and bring in guest speakers. So today, again, we're so happy to have the MDA part of this, and then we will continue our tour around the country that we started last summer. I think we started touring and inviting site PIs from different sites to give us a view of a window into their site. So we had a number of CPIs. Next week we have Dr. Dries from Northwestern University in Chicago, Illinois. So we're happy to have her. And then we will, I know our patient navigation team is working on a schedule for 2022. So as soon as we finalize everyone's schedule, we'll share the list of new guest speakers for 2022. And the QR codes are important for you to register for the new webinars, or also to sign up for the ALS link, which is our newsletter about ALS research. Great. And with that, do we want to take some questions?
Yes, yeah, we have a lot of good questions coming in. First of all, for Sharon, when is the 2022 conference? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
Yep, yeah. I'm on the. Okay, so it's the 3rd week of March, which I believe starts March 13th, maybe. But it's that 3rd week of March, and it goes Monday through Wednesday.
It's in Nashville, but it'll be virtual, right, as well?
Yes, it's a hybrid conference, so it'll be live and virtual.
Great. Another question for you, Sharon. Do you have data on asymptomatic people who are genetically at risk to have ALS?
We do not. That would be very interesting data to have. And I know that there are certainly people out there who are in that categories, but we in the mover database, we only have people who are diagnosed with ALS. So you have to be symptomatic and diagnosed. So we don't have the data in mover.
I add that there's 3 studies that are looking to follow people who are at high risk for ALS, who carry a gene but are not symptomatic. And those 3 groups are working together. It's Michael Benatar that MDA has supported and really launched in Miami, University of Miami, Neil Schneider and Matt Harms at Columbia, and then Katie Nicholson at Mass General, and Tim Miller at WashU. And I think together they're following about 500 people, but they are looking for more participants. And those studies are really important to try to understand how to intervene pre-symptom onset and how to diagnose sooner. So also for Sharon, what progress, if any, has been made regards to airlines allowing wheelchair to enter into the plane, people who don't transfer?
Not a lot of progress. So that's been a really frustrating thing. And I know when I've talked to my colleague, Paul, so he's on that federal advisory committee now, and he's a little frustrated at the progress. I mean, I think he's hopeful about it, but I think everyone on the committee is a little frustrated about the pace of the progress. And, you know, we need to think about how to turn up the heat a bit on those airlines, I think. Because this is a problem that has been ongoing for a very long time. And there are some pretty basic ways to solve it that all involve money. So whether it's setting aside spaces to be able to drive your own wheelchair onto the plane, which, you know, airlines are reluctant to do, but I think we just have to turn the heat up significantly on them.
So Sabrina, a few questions for you. When will Platform E start? I heard next few days.
Yeah, so I believe we're targeting the last week of January for the first enrollment, and it's going to be at a few sites. I have to say I don't recall exactly the list, but we have a group of first few sites that will be activated, and then the other ones are undergoing training and other procedures, but will be following shortly.
Maybe next week we can put up a list of the first sites. So we have about 23 sites who are almost ready to get going, but because of like the COVID and the whole supply chain challenges, we actually don't have enough drug for all those 23 sites. So we're going to start with 8, and then every week or so try to add more and try to manage that supply chain challenge. But we'll definitely be opening 8 sites in the next week or 2. And we'll let you know next week, those 8 sites. We're very excited to start. Another question, Sabrina, will you announce when the trial closes and everyone has completed their 6 months? I think that has to do with regimen.
Yes, absolutely. So as you know, we've been posting a few announcements on our website, and we also reiterate those on these weekly webinars. So as soon as that happens, I think over the summer, we will definitely keep you posted. And that's also why I suggest that you sign up for the ALS link. That's our newsletter. So if you're interested in having the email go directly to you, you can also sign up that way. And please keep coming to these weekly meetings.
Great. So this is a biomarker question, Sabrina. Our, I don't know how this pronounces, our neopterin and P75, which were identified by a research team in Australia, are we going to be measuring those in the HEALEY platform trial?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because yes, that's something that we are actually working actively on right now in terms of nailing down the operational aspects of that. We've been in direct conversations with the group in Australia that developed that for a long time, really, basically since the beginning of the trial. And now we are getting to the point that we can begin the process. So absolutely, that will be part of the platform trial, and we'll release the results when they're available.
So there's a question about the inclusion criteria. Why do we have one about being able to swallow medication at the master level rather than the regimen? For example, one regimen E is an infusion, so swallowing would be needed.
Yeah, that's an important question. So the reason we have all the main inclusion-exclusion criteria at the master protocol level is because we need the same population to be enrolled in every regimen in order to be able to leverage really the most important aspect of the platform trial, which is the sharing of placebo data across regimens. By having the same population, we are happy to share placebo data, which is what allows us to use an active to placebo ratio, which is much more favorable than any other trial, 3-to-1, meaning many more people on active than people on placebo. And that's because essentially the same placebo group is used for multiple drugs.
Thank you. There's a question about the open label. With respect to the 330 people in open label extension, what's the breakdown for each regimen? Or can you provide that?
Yeah, I don't have the exact numbers, but essentially it's been equally distributed. Now, regimens A, B, and C, as you may recall, started earlier. So they have roughly the same number, 90, 100, something like that per regimen. And instead, regimen D has just few, not as many, simply because it started 6 months later. And so not enough people have already completed to be eligible. But essentially, the percentage of people that choose to go into each open label extension is roughly the same across regimens.
A question for you, Sharon. Why not genetically test everyone looking for patterns? I think this is for Mover.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, actually, I was still just thinking about the first question. I think that is one of the things that, we've just started analyzing that data, the ALS data, and we saw the low percentage of testing. It actually surprised me how low it was. And I think that that's something that we could do. We could certainly support additional protocol. I will say this, Mover, the way it's set up is we don't ask people to do anything that their doctor doesn't want them to do. So it's whatever normal care they're receiving. So if they would not normally be tested for ALS, we're not asking them to go and do something extra as part of the Mover protocol. It is an opportunity, but also the way we do it means that we can kind of get an idea what kind of care is happening without, tinkering with what happens at the sites. We'll get a good idea of what the care is. And what it's telling us right now is people aren't being tested. So what we would probably do is launch some kind of educational campaign to encourage our care center directors to do that.
Yeah, that would be important. I mean, it's now not a barrier for cost because it's free if we send to Invitae. So some centers are doing it, everybody, and some aren't. So I like that idea of education of the centers. Here's a question, I guess, Sabrina, for you. If a drug works, can we get access to it? I know there are funding issues, but can't our insurance pay for the drug?
Yeah, so if a drug works and it's approved by the FDA, the hope is that it will be covered by insurance. As you know, FDA approval is one process, but then the insurance coverage is actually a separate process. So hopefully, again, the insurance companies will cover it.
Thank you. Also, maybe for Sabrina, how do you get onto trials if you've been diagnosed with ALS? Anything to do about loss of voice?
Yeah. So if absolutely getting on trials, I think is something that people ask us about all the time. And I think there are opportunities at this time. We have more spots in general. If you look not just at the platform trial, but all trials in ALS than we had, years before. So I would encourage you, first of all, to talk to your physician and ALS care team to see what's available at that location, but also what might be available in your state or neighboring areas. And then, as you know, we have a patient navigation team, Catherine and Allison, who are on the line with us today, and they're always available as a central resource.
Any updates on trials involved with bone marrow derived stem cells in ALS? I'm happy to answer that one.
Yeah.
If you want me to. Yeah. The only trial I know of, and there might be more going on perhaps in Europe, but there's a study in South Korea by a company CoreStem. They're in the phase 3 trial of stem cells derived from bone marrow. And that's given into the spinal fluid. And I think they've enrolled maybe 80 or 90 people, but they're continuing to enroll. So for Sharon, there's thank you. First of all, great information. One of the challenges is having one central registration. I was diagnosed in 2016 and have registered to 4 different registers. Is there a way to focus on one or get them to merge?
Yeah, so what we can do is rather than merge the data is be able to relate it. So if we can assign everybody what's called a GUID, it's a global unique identifier. And there's actually a type of GUID called a NeuroGUID that's already in pretty wide use for ALS data and registry data. If everyone is using that same system, then it means we'll know if you're in one database, we'll know you're in the other database, and we'll be able to ideally link your data if we have the right permissions to do that. And then that actually makes those data sets very powerful. And I think the advantage to not merging them is it means that all the independent sources of support can stay in place. If you merge them, there's always a potential that you will lose data or lose support for one of those. But this way, we can make those data sets talk to one another is the short answer. And we're looking to do that.
I'll add that the platform trial uses NeuroGUID, so that if somebody is in the platform trial and also is in the MDA mover or some other registry, we can link that data as well. Sabrina, there's a question before, I think this has to do with platform trial. Before the trial ends, can we get access to drugs that work?
So access is to investigational products, is through different mechanisms. Now, the most established mechanism is clinical trials. And then if the drug works and the clinical trial proves that the drug works, then one would have to wait for FDA approval and getting it reimbursed clinically in order to get access to it. Now, there is another path that's becoming more used, which is also known as expanded access, that can be used during the conduct of the trial for people who are not eligible for the trial. And then there's something called sort of a larger expanded access that could be used when there is this sort of intermediate situation where, you know, let's say that you know that the drug works and it's undergoing the process of FDA review, but it's not being approved quite yet. So there could be also a bridge using an expanded access path to give access while the approval process is ongoing. So again, it all depends on the details. That depends on the timing and other things.
Thank you. And our last question, also maybe for you, Sabrina, is if we learn from cancer research that more than one drug is needed to cure cancer, why aren't there trials with multiple drugs for ALS?
Well, I agree with you. I think, you know, combination treatment ultimately will be the answer. But the way I think about it is every drug adds to the standard of care. So, for example, in the platform trial, we allow people to take approved medications, for example, riluzole, Nuedexta, or edaravone, and then we add sort of one drug at a time. And then ideally, you know, if we see that the drug works and can be safely combined with all the previous drugs, that will allow us to continue to increase the cocktail.
Thank you. And one more question came in, and then we'll call it a night. If AMX 035 is approved in the summer, can you take it with one of the HEALEY drugs during open label extension? And Sabrina, do you want to?
Yeah. So again, to the point of combination treatment, absolutely. So we said that, you know, if the drug is approved, then it's available in pharmacies, and then it can be taken by trial participants.
Great question. And we're looking forward to hopefully that happening. So Sabrina, if you want to close.
Yeah, no, I think this was really great. And so thank you so much to Dr. Hesterlee for joining. We look forward to continuing to work with you. And there are different opportunities that we also discussed, how to link registries and continue to do scientific projects together. So we'll certainly do that. And thank you so much for your support.
I want to thank you too, Sharon, and say also that my very first grant as a fellow was from MDA. So I'm very grateful for your help in starting my career. So hope you keep supporting young people.
Thank you so much for letting me present here today. So
thank you.
Good night, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.